Good morning and welcome back to Friday, the day 6 of our study through the book of Philippians. And today we're going to be in Philippians 1 verses 19 through 26. And as we've seen the last two, this is really almost the third part of a little mini section. And we saw in the last two that Paul prayed a very specific prayer in verses 9 through 11 for the Philippian believers. And he prayed that they would be abounding in love, that their knowledge and their discernment of what is spiritually best would be valuable. He prayed that they would have sincerity in Christ, that it wouldn't just be peripheral on the surface, and it wouldn't be evidence just before people, but it would be truly a heart change that is resulting in them, in their walk with Christ. And then lastly, that it would result in fruitful growth. And then Paul displayed that, how he himself is living that out as well, and how he desires that for the church to continue. In verses 19 through 26, though, Paul's going to continue on the topic of his imprisonment. And he sees his imprisonment as an opportunity for him and for others as well to grow. And so read with me in verse 19. "For I know that this shall turn to my salvation through your prayer and the supply of the Spirit of Jesus Christ, according to my earnest expectation and my hope, that in nothing I shall be ashamed, but that with all boldness, as always, so now also Christ shall be magnified in my body, whether it be by life or by death. For to me to live is Christ, and to die is gain. But if I live in the flesh, this is the fruit of my labor. Yet what I shall choose, I wot not. For I am in a strait betwixt two, having a desire to depart and to be with Christ, which is far better. Nevertheless, to abide in the flesh is more needful for you. And having this confidence, I know that I shall abide and continue with you all for your furtherance and joy of faith, that your rejoicing may be more abundant in Jesus Christ for me by my coming to you again." Paul's imprisonment, as he states here, is an opportunity for him and for others to grow. And he sees that in several different facets. And that's what I want to walk through. Starting in verse 19, I want you to pause right away here and identify what is it about his imprisonment that he sees as an opportunity. Pause now and answer that question. Okay, so we see it's an opportunity to grow in or to grow the gospel, for the gospel to advance. Paul knows that his trial, which may have already begun at this point, or at least the preliminary stages, it may result or will result in the gospel being heard. We've already seen Paul display that in the book of Acts as he walked before Agrippa and different rulers, and he gave his testimony, his personal conversion, and he spoke boldly. He proclaimed the gospel and how the gospel changes people, transforms people. His salvation here is not directly a reference to his eternal salvation, but simply his release. He means his release from bondage is literally what he's saying here in this passage. And his release from prison, either through death, promoting him to heaven, or his release from prison to walk among the churches again. Either way, he sees it as an opportunity for the gospel to be proclaimed. So whether life or death, the gospel will be magnified, it will be explained, it will be exalted, and it will be communicated to others. So he's actually looking forward to the results of the trial. He doesn't have trepidation. Whether it be life or death, it doesn't matter. And he's going to emphasize that again here in the next couple verses. Verse 20, he says, "According to my earnest expectation and my hope, that in nothing I shall be ashamed, but that with all boldness, as always, so now also Christ shall be magnified in my body." So he sees his imprisonment as an opportunity for Christ to be magnified. Paul starts verse 20 by saying he has an earnest expectation and a hope. Those are two different words. Earnest expectation is one word, and hope is another. And they're very vivid words. In fact, the word that is translated here, earnest expectation, literally means turning your head and stretching your neck so that you can see a consuming passion, something that has grabbed your attention, piqued your interest or your curiosity, and you are straining with all your effort to see it. That's what Paul has here. He has this earnest expectation and a hope. And we've talked about hope a lot over the last couple of years. Hope is a confident expectation or a firm belief in the completion of a promise. It's not hope how we use today. Hope we use today is like wishful thinking. He's not hoping to inherit money or hoping that something good will happen. He has confidence that God's purpose in this is absolutely best. His perspective, however, is that Christ be magnified. It's magnified simply means to be made great or to enlarge. And he wants God to be better known throughout the world. And that can have a couple different ramifications. That can be literally in numbers. He wants more people to hear of Christ, but it can also be he wants more people to hear the deeper truth of Christ. So it's the literal expansion of the name of Christ throughout the world. And he's willing to do it either by life or by death. This can occur. And he sees it as an opportunity. Verse 21, very famous verse, "For to me to live is Christ, and to die is gain." And so it doesn't matter life or death. This is going to occur. God will be magnified, whether Paul lives or Paul dies. He sees living as an opportunity to magnify Christ because he can continue to speak for him. And he sees his death as his completion of magnifying Christ, in which many people will speak of his death. In fact, we're still speaking of it today. So Paul was absolutely right. Life and in death, both have caused Christ's name to be magnified. The third thing that Paul sees his imprisonment as an opportunity for is found in verse 22 through verse 25. I'm going to ask you to read this as a group. So would you pause, read verses 22 to 25, and answer, what does he see his imprisonment as an opportunity to do? The third thing. This one could be a little bit harder to identify, although it's straight out of verse 22. He says, "But if I live in the flesh, this is the fruit of my labor." So he sees it as an opportunity to produce fruit. His imprisonment, an opportunity to advance the gospel, an opportunity to magnify Christ, and an opportunity to increase fruit production for him. Paul's outcome is uncertain, and that's what he's saying here in verse 22 at the very end. He says, "Yet what I shall choose, I wot not." Paul is content, living or dying. Paul is content. It doesn't matter which one. In fact, contentment is going to be kind of a key theme throughout the book of Philippians. It's contentment. It's joy through contentment, regardless of circumstances. And so he's saying here, I wot not. I don't know. He doesn't know what he wants to do. Does he want to live or does he want to die? If given the choice, he wouldn't really want to choose. To die means he gets to be in heaven with Christ, and that's awesome. That's great. To live means he continues to work for Christ. But both of them, life or death, will result in the production of fruit. And so it's not a statement of despondency. He's not saying, "Oh, I don't even know. Oh, woe is me." He's not saying that. He's saying life or death doesn't matter. In fact, verse 21 is very clear. "For to me to live is Christ, and to die is gain." To live, I live to glorify Christ. To die is spiritual victory. I gain eternal existence with God, or eternal fellowship with the Lord, never to be broken again. Either one is a good option. And so he's not here in despondency. He's not frustrated. He's not scared. He's fully surrendered to God's plan. He exclusively wants God's plan, whether that be a martyr's death or continued victory in living. Here's the point. Paul's purpose is certain. Verse 22. He says, "To live in the flesh, this is the fruit of my labor, yet what I shall choose, I want not." Then jump down to verse 24. "Nevertheless, to abide in the flesh is more needful for you. And I have this confidence. I know that I shall abide and continue with you all for your furtherance and joy of faith. In other words, if he continues to live, he knows that he's going to continue to be faithful to the Lord, and he's going to continue to produce fruit for Christ. His purpose will not differ whether he dies or he lives. And so it's just an obvious statement of fact. If he lives, if he makes it through this trial, he will use his waking moments to glorify Christ and advance Christ's kingdom. So Paul chooses, here's his choice. He says in verse 22, I don't know what to choose, life or death, I don't know. But he does know what he's going to use his life for. He doesn't know when it will end, but he's going to use it for Christ. And so Paul chooses to focus now on Christ. And that's the point. He chooses to focus on Christ, not the dire circumstances, not impending death, not imprisonment. He chooses to focus on Christ. Verse 25, and having this confidence, I know that I shall abide and continue with you all for your furtherance and joy of faith, that your rejoicing may be more abundant in Jesus Christ for me by my coming to you again. So his attention is now back on the Philippian believers. Just like the prayer, verses 9 through verse 11, Paul is concerned with their spiritual growth and their spiritual well-being. And so this is the focus here. Paul's not focused on himself. He's not concerned with his life circumstances. Paul knows that his imprisonment will advance the gospel. He knows that his imprisonment will magnify the name of Christ. And he knows that his imprisonment can produce more fruit, not less fruit. And so he's going to use all of these with a singular purpose, a singular focus, and that is to glorify Christ in everything that he does. He wants the believers in Philippi to understand this and to grow in their understanding of God under all circumstances. And regardless of circumstances, to use their life for the purpose of glorifying Christ. I hope this was encouragement to you today. Don't be consumed with the frustration of circumstance or the fear of circumstance, but glorify God in the opportunity that we have to magnify his name, regardless of what's going on around us. I hope you have a blessed day, and may the Lord continue to grant you peace and grace.